All right, welcome back to Crypto Finder. We're here with Michael Kong, the director of Sonic Labs. Welcome to Crypto Finder, Michael. How you going?
Hey Fred, good. Yeah, it's great to talk to you again. Appreciate the opportunity.
Now, before we dive in, we crossed paths quite a while ago in Australia,
Yeah,
and for a lot of people who don't know, do you want to tell a story about how you first got into crypto?
yeah. So this was quite a while back. I think I first met you in 2017 or 2018 because obviously Finder and yourself was getting into crypto then, and we just like crossed paths as part of the community. But beforehand, I would say I first heard about uh, Bitcoin in 2012, but unfortunately, I didn't really invest back then. And the reason being is because I was listening to this quite famous fund manager now called Peter Schiff. He had like a radio show, and he was talking about like investing in gold and don't invest in Bitcoin. It's $5, but it's going to zero, and it was like $10 and it's going to zero. And to be fair to him, he would get crypto people on his platform even back then. And they would kind of like debate and stuff. And because I was like such a fanboy of his, I actually went out and bought some gold, which obviously like recently has done pretty well, but Bitcoin would have done far better. And
Yeah.
so I like kind of like dismissed Bitcoin as maybe not something that will really last very long. And I was also familiar with another form of previous electronic cash called like Digibank, I think by a guy called David Chom. And I like studied that and realized that system didn't really like work out in the end for a variety of reasons. But I didn't realize that Bitcoin was quite different in many ways. And so like really when I started like owning my first Bitcoin was around in like 2013 when I met other people who were invested in Bitcoin and they kind of like told me about the technology again and the philosophy and all that. And that's when like I started to get more involved. And then it was around 2015, 16 that I heard about Ethereum because there were a few what I call like evangelists at the University of Sydney where I was studying at. So I studied like finance and IT there. And they were going around in the IT department and kind of like preaching Ethereum and saying that, oh, this is the future. We will be able to do like all of this stuff that we now call like decentralized finance. And basically, like you better get on board. And I was one of the people that listened to these individuals. I was like, oh yeah, that kind of makes sense. I want to try and get on board and see what happens. And so I did a bunch of research at university, and then later on, I established a cryptocurrency fund with a few other people in Australia who came from mainly traditional finance. And that's when we kind of crossed paths because you and I were going to different crypto events that were happening in Sydney. And in particular, one of them was called like the Sydney Ethereum events or Sid Ethereum events. I don't know if they're still happening, but I think that's where we might have crossed paths there and then just kind of like became friends and started talking and exchanging ideas and that sort of thing.
Yeah, that's wild. I remember, 2015, like I remember that's a long time ago, in 2016, 2017. Like you were so early into smart contracts and like understanding those, unpacking those and studying them. Like even before people knew what blockchains were, pretty much. Well, like a majority of people knowing what blockchains were. And that's clearly paid off. And that was a bold move really from you, to push into blockchain, particularly that early. I remember I remember the fund. I was like, wow, like that's just so ahead of everyone. And I think one of the things I thought was another bold move in 2024, you took the Phantom name and changed it. You killed Phantom and then you rebirthed it into Sonic. Can you tell us about the reason that sort of what was your insight or reason for doing that?
So there were two main reasons in terms of the rebrand. It had to do with like marketing and the technology. So on the marketing side, we wanted to kind of just give the brand a refresh because the Project Phantom had has been around for a long time. It's one of the oldest continuing crypto projects that's out there. It did an ICO in early to mid 2018. And in part, we just wanted to like give a refresh to make it like kind of like more modern in alignment with like the other technologies that were coming out that day. So that was one reason. The other reason is that um, regarding the technology is we had onboarded new people to the organization a couple of years prior, including my old professor, Professor Bernard Schultz from the University of Sydney. So I started under him doing this like smart contract, et cetera, research in 2016, 17. And so we brought him on board to help like significantly improve the underlying technology. And we had also, and he brought along a team with him as well. And when we're looking at the improvements to the technology, we could have got better improvements using the existing chain and modifying it, but we wouldn't have been able to achieve much better longer term technology goals had we not forked and created our own network due to a variety of technical reasons. And so it was a difference between, modifying the existing, I guess you could say, like, use an analogy, like an airplane and changing the different parts and stuff while it's flying, or just kind of building a new airplane and launching that and moving people over and the resources over to it, which I think was the correct move, more longer term. Because the problem with the old chain is that because the technology was so old from 2018, 2019, we would have had to put a lot more effort into making it a lot more competitive in terms of its scalability and performance compared to the other competitors that are out there, which came a bit later than us. So it was really for those two main reasons that we decided to rebrand.
I think, anytime you make a big decision like that in any business, there's obviously ways you could look at it that, like, here's the things that could go wrong, here's the things that could go right. But I think having the guts to go and actually execute and do that, I think, is like amazing. I think another thing that you've brought out is fee monetization or fee sharing with with the applications that sit on the blockchain. Can you tell us about that? Has that worked?
I would say it has worked to some extent, but the issue with fee monetization. So just to give people an overview as to what it is, fee monetization is the idea that when transaction fees are generated on the network, instead of the transaction fees, which are basically the fees that are paid by the people who use the network. So it's similar to, say, when you go in the store and you pay with a credit card, you pay a certain transaction fee. On the chain, it's a lot less than that, but you still have to pay a fee because the network has to spend time and computation and do work to basically confirm that transaction. And so usually all the transaction fees will go to what are known as the validators. So these are computers on the network that basically confirm your transactions, the databases, the servers, that sort of thing. But instead of like someone building an application for the network and having all the transaction fees go towards the validators, we had this idea about having a portion of those fees, up to 90%, actually going back to the app developer themselves. And so what that means is that as an app developer, you're incentivized in order to drive more volume through your application, whatever that application might be, because you're generating yourself more fees. So it's another like revenue stream. And that has been somewhat successful. I'd say in the past year, we've probably created hundreds of thousands of dollars, maybe like close to $1 million in revenue for the applications on the chain, and the rest has gone to like the network. But also at the same time, it's a little bit of a chicken and egg in that you have to like try and get your network to such a prominent standard in terms of network effects that you really like kick off this flywheel where people's applications just keep getting more and more users and they keep generating more and more revenue. And we haven't quite got there yet. I think largely due to the market conditions. But I think in the end, like if a network were to get really, really popular, like our network or any network, and they have this sort of model in place, then you can have applications go on the network and then just generating heaps of revenue just from this one revenue stream, not to mention the others as well. It would be kind of like setting up a website, and every time a visitor comes to your website, you're just making money from them by the fact that they're visiting your website.
I think this model is something which needs to be more explored by other chains as well. And I think a lot of them, it happens now sort of in sort of relatively, um, you know, like grants and things like that, that just aren't, there's no network effect really. Like there is to some extent like a network effect, but it's done in a very, not a democratized way. And it's not very transparent. And I think that's where I think, again, you're taking a very, early and I think very forward step. And I think to some extent, doing things differently. You started in Australia, and I guess in Australia you have to do things differently to compete on the global stage, and you're doing that from NASA and now, which is fantastic. What do you think? What do you think Australia sort of gets right about crypto founders? What do you think it produces?
Well, not to get too political, but talking about, for example, the latest budget, I think the politicians don't really care about this new and emerging industry. You have had a couple of politicians and senators come out there and kind of like talk positively about crypto and say, we need to help grow this industry and stuff because it'll create jobs and prosperity and all that sort of great talk, which is all fine. But that's really a minority of politicians, and it just hasn't really been much of a political issue. So it hasn't really got much attention. But the problem with Australia right now with the latest budget, as you're of course very well aware, Fred, as a business owner yourself, the current government is proposing to significantly increase the capital gains tax on not just like housing, which is like what was sold at, right, in order to make housing more affordable and stuff for younger Australians and all that, but on all businesses, right? On any asset class whatsoever. And so if you're like running a crypto business, you're directly impacted by that because you start up a business and it becomes really successful. And then the government can take upwards of 47% of whatever you make instead of with the discount 23.5%. And so, as you're probably aware as well, there's all these memes about people dropping in the Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, into like their shots and stuff and saying, like, oh, meet my silent business partner. He gets 40% of everything, but he does nothing at all. He's just like a silent guy. And I think that's really sad because it means that for crypto businesses in Australia, why would you want to run a business in Australia when you get taxed up to 47%? When you can go, for example, to Singapore or even New Zealand, just across the pond, just across the Tasman Sea, and you're paying 0% capital gains, you're paying nothing. Or you go to other countries such as Canada, the UK, USA, and you're probably paying upwards of like 24% tax there. So it's really disappointing. Just to like quickly summarize it, there's not really much talk at all about crypto in Australia from the politicians. There was nothing in the budget recently, just this month, that really talked about it. And in fact, they just seem to be punishing business owners and wealth creators and people who want to actually like take risks and have a go with these insanely new taxes that they're proposing at the moment.
Mark, I can't more firmly agree with you. I think I was saying on social media that founders are going to look to leave the country, and I think you're a good example of that, where you're a leader of a critical blockchain in the ecosystem. You've left. We're exporting our best talent. There aren't those incentives for you to stay when you're in one of the growth industries of the world. I think it is sad to a large degree. I think it's un-Australian, to be fair with you, as
Yeah,
well.
100%.
Um,
We have a saying just for like the international audience. It's called having a fair go in Australia, and it's essentially equivalent to the American dream, right? That you can come to Australia, or you can be born in Australia, and you can take advantage of opportunities and work hard and stuff, and you'll be rewarded, right? By rewarding others, by growing a business like Fred has done very successfully, you get rewarded as well for your hard work, and that sort of has been put to the wayside where you don't really even hear much of the rhetoric like that anymore. It's very like class, what I'd say like class or generational talk about, generational equality or generational inequality and, boomer versus young person, or it's like rich versus like middle class or poor. And when a society really engages in that sort of rhetoric rather than trying to work together and think about, okay, how do we create wealth and how do we become productive and how do we attract talent from around the world and resources and investments and stuff, which is all global these days, then it's kind of just like a race to the bottom where everyone is just trying to take money from someone else. And instead of like actually trying to do work, they're doing that. And then you're just kind of going downhill. So, I hope in Australia that the things can kind of like turn around from that. There seems to be some relatively early indications that might be the case, but we'll have to like wait and see. But it is sad because the country has a lot of opportunities and still has a lot of opportunities to do really, really well, but we're just kind of not really focusing in those areas.